And dear students, today our topic is about the sources of energy. So first we define what is the energy. So energy sources can be broadly categorized into two types. The first is the renewable energy and the second one is the non-renewable energy. So first we define what is the renewable energy source. So the renewable energy sources are those that are replenished naturally over time. So this we can define further that they are considered sustainable and environmentally friendly. For example, some of the most common renewable energy sources include such as the wind energy, solar energy, geothermal energy, biomass energy, and hydropower energy. So these are the example of some of the renewable energy sources. So we will discuss one by one each renewable energy sources with respect to their function and work. So first we define what is the solar energy. So solar energy can be defined as that energy which can harnessing the energy from the sun radiation. For example, it can be used for heating, electricity generation and water heating. So solar panels are the example of the solar energy which basically convert the sunlight into the electricity. So this we explain with this diagram. This is the solar energy system. For example, solar energy is the energy that's come from the sun's radiation. So it can be captured and converted into the usable form of the power, such as the electricity or heat, using some of the technology which we call the solar panels. So solar panels are made up of the photovoltaic cells and the solar thermal systems. So these solar energy or the solar radiation convert the sunlight energy into the electrical energy. The second renewable energy source is the wind energy. So this energy can be defined as that it can converting the kinetic energy of winds into electricity. So basically winds are turbines generating electricity. So this can be explained with this diagram that how it work. Basically wind turbines operate on a simple principle. It basically capture the wind turns the propeller like the blades of the turbines. These are the blades of the turbines which can be rotate. So conversion will be occur. The rotating blades spin a rotors which is connected to the shifts, and after the shifts the generation, the shift spans an electric generators which transform the mechanical rotational energy into the electrical energy that can then be feed into a power grids or usually locally arranged, right? So it's mean that the shift spans in electrical generators which transform the mechanical, which is the rotational energy, into the electrical energy. So the third example, which the is the renewable energy source, we call them as the hydropowers. So the hydropowers can be defined as it utilizing the energy of flowing water to generate the electricity. So the examples of the hydropower is the dams store water and release it to turns the turbines. So this we can define with this diagram that how it works. For example, water from a rivers or reservoirs usually stored behind the dams flow through large pipes called the penstocks. So these there are some turbines present which we call the turbine rotations. Here the force of the moving water spins the turbines blades. So when the turbines blades move, so the electricity generation will be occur. For example, the spinning turbines is connected to a generator which convert the mechanical energy to the turbines into the electrical energy. So here the mechanism present which is the transmission. Transmission is that the generated electricity is sent through power lines to the home, schools and industries. So it's mean that the water cycle continuity after passing through the turbines, water flow back into the rivers. So water is wasted. So it's mean that the hydropower is the another renewable energy sources which we can easily generate the electricity. So the fourth example of the renewable energy source is the geothermal energy. It can be defined as to harnessing heat energy from the earth core. Basically we use for heating or the electricity generation. Now the question is how it works. Basically, first heat from the earth, deep beneath the earth's surface, rocks are extremely hot because of the natural decay of radioactive materials. So the leftover heat from the earth's formation, firstly it will be occur. Second, wells and hot water extraction. The second step was that engineers drill deep well into these hot regions to reach underground reservoirs. So hot water or steam is then brought to the surface through these wells. And the third step was that the energy conversion. Now the energy conversion is that the electricity generation will be produced. How it will work? The steam, for example, sometime very hot water is used to turn the turbines which drive electrical generators to produce the electricities. So it's mean there are three main types of the geothermal power plants. That may be the dry steam plants where the steams directly used from the ground, or the flash steam plants where the high pressure hot water will be turned the steams and reduce the pressure, or some are the binary cycle plants which transfer the heat to another fluid. So after that the fourth step was the direct use and the heating. So in some places geothermal energy is used directly, for example for heating homes, greenhouses or swimming pools, or drying crops or warming the fish farms. So district heating system or hot water pipes to many buildings, right? So after the supply, the fifth step is water reinjection. After the heat is used, the cold water is pumped back into the earth to maintain the pressure and make the process sustainable. So now the fifth example of the renewable energy source is the biomass energy. So biomass energy can be defined as to converting the organic matters, for example plants and animal wastes, into the energy. So it can be burned to produce heat and convert into the biofuel. So this we explain with the example of the biomass energy and how it works. So basically, plants absorb the sunlight and store energy through the photosynthesis. So this picture we can observe that the sunlight have been stored energy through the photosynthesis. So some of the biomass are those that like the woods and the crop wastes are burned or processed, right? That store energy is released as a heat. So this heat can be used to produce the steams that drive the turbines for electricity, or it can be converted into biofuels for the vehicles. So this is the general explanation of the biomass energy, which is the example of the renewable energy source. So now we define what is the non-renewable energy sources. So the non-renewable energy sources are those that exist in limited quantities and cannot be replenished on a human timescale. How? So they are the finite and their use contributes to the environmental pollutions and the climate change. For example, some of the most common non-renewable energy sources include, so we will discuss one by one each energy sources. This is the journal example of the non-renewable energy sources. So we will discuss one by one. The first example is that the fossil fuels. So the example of the fossil fuels like the coal, oil and the natural gas form from the remains of the ancient organisms. So they burn to produce the heat and the electricity. So this is a general diagram of the fossil fuel. For example, firstly the organic matter accumulation like the fossil fuels began with the plants, algae and small animals that lived millions of the year ago. So when they die, their remains sink to the bottoms of the swamp, oceans, or the lake. So, layers of the mud and sand cover the dead matters, preventing it from decomposing completely. So this is the first step of the biofuels or the fossil fuels formation. Secondly, sediments, burial and pressure. For example, the weight and the pressure from these layers squeeze the dead material tightly, so the oxygen supply is cut off, and so the material does not rooted. It slowly turn into a dense organic substances. In that case, we call the dense organic substances as a carrigon. So after that, the third step was heat and chemical changes. So there was the changes in the layers get bear deeper, temperature and pressure increase, and the heat causes chemical reactions that change the organic materials into coal, oil, and the natural gases. After that, the first step was migrations and the trapping. So, oil and gases can be moved toward some of the porous rocks until they get trapped under non porous rock layers. So, these traps form the reservoir which the humans can later drill to extract the fuels. So, this is the general example of the fossil fuel, that is the non renewable energy source. The second example of the non renewable energy source is the nuclear energy. So we can define the nuclear energy is releasing energy through nuclear fission or the fusion reaction, and we will use for it for the electricity generation. So this is the general diagram of the nuclear energy. Firstly, the first step is the fuel in the nuclear energy. So the fuel may be the uranium and the plutonium, right? The fuel used in the nuclear power plant is usually uranium and the plutonium. And the second step in the nuclear energy is the nuclear fission reaction. So inside the reactor's core, a neutron hit a uranium atom's nucleus. For example, some of the neutrons hit the uranium atom's nucleus. So this is the second step in the nuclear fission. Third, the heat generation. So the energy released from the fission heat up the water inside the reactors. Fourth one, steam production. So the hot water is used to produce steam in a separate loop or a heat exchanger. So these stem pressure spin the turbines. So the fifth step was the electricity generation. So the turbines are connected to the generator which convert the mechanical energy into the electricity. And the sixth one is the cooling step. After the steam passed through the turbines, it cool condense back into the water and recycle to start the process again. And then the last step, which is the safety and the waste. So control rods made up of the material like the boron and the cadmium absorb the excess reaction stables. So it means that nuclear energy is a very time consuming process, so that's why we categorize them into the non renewable energy source. So in this topic we have been discuss about the renewable energy sources, their different types, and the non renewable energy sources with their respective types on the basis of their functions and how it work and sustain and to generate the electricity. Thank you so much.